Alrighty, I wanted to make a video that details a few potential ideas that Resident Evil 9 is clearly setting up at the Resident Evil Village. Some of this will be pre-established information along with my personal theories on what is yet to come. Keep in mind that nothing is really set in stone about Resident Evil 9, so please take everything I say here at face value. The first thing we have to talk about is the main MacGuffin herself of Resident Evil Village, Rosemary Winters. She is the daughter of Ethan Winters, and she was seemingly reconstructed after parts of her were put into a crystallized stasis. Then Mother Miranda tried reconstructing her deceased daughter via ritual to shape Rose into Eva. The baby reformulated back to its original state, which means that the ceremony was a complete failure. We find out later that Ethan Winters fell victim to the mutamycete mold, which granted him superhuman endurance to physical trauma. Why is this important, you ask? It's because Rosemary has inherited these mutagenic powers, which effectively makes her a bioweapon. There is also a stark reminder that occurs near the epilogue when Rose grabs some agent by the throat, only to exclaim, "I can show you things that even Chris doesn't know that I'm capable of." This dialogue could refer back to the original E-Virus report that was detailed in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. They talked about an idea involving complete infection because if Rose's parents had unique traits, then Rose is the perfect combination within the mold bloodline. Complete infections were said to be very rare and very destabilized as the subject begins to lose all human traits. This doesn't happen with Rosemary as they claim. Physical mutations differ from case to case, but all result in him or her acquiring incredible physical strength. There's probably reasons why Ethan didn't get his strength, yet Rosemary did, and I also think that Jack and Mia are also pretty strong too. Like I said, it's a case-by-case basis. Rose was a pure mold, and she was only a little bit bigger in size once born. Something was off, but both of her parents were riddled with mold. We also can't forget why the agents compared Rose to Evelyn from the last game. If you remember RE7 correctly, then you're probably aware that there was a mental link that could be established due to what the mutamycete could do. It could root through conscious individuals with a deep mind control from a genetically altered standpoint. The human would then snap apart, and that will leave the common person susceptible to becoming mold under their influence. When you think about all this crazy shit, it means that Rosemary is completely overpowered. It means that she has several distinctive parameters surrounding her, like Chris Redfield's BSAA training, superhuman regeneration, superhuman strength, mind control, viral assimilation since all things come from the mutagenic mother virus, and the ability to craft people into biological molded as she sees fit. This sort of reminds me of that end segment in Resistance 2 where Nathan Hale acquires powers from Daedalus and he turns everyone into mulch by walking straight into them. This means that we have the most dangerous molded ever witnessed, so it's no surprise that the feds have guns trained on Rosemary because they know they will shit a brick if she goes rogue. One thing that probably will happen in Resident Evil 9 is that Rosemary probably will experience a core hallucination with Ethan Winters. It seems people are able to impart themselves onto a subconscious as the E-series infected. We got a good glimpse of this when Evelyn was inside Ethan's head in Resident Evil Village. This Ethan Rosemary scene will clearly be played up for a dramatic effect since he's pretty much dead once Village wrapped up. Rosemary will likely be used as a means to an end for bioterrorism on the planet, which could fall in line with the rumor of the title game being named Resident Evil Apocalypse. I hope that leak ends up being false. We already have a Resident Evil Apocalypse. It's the movie where Jill Valentine gets sidelined for no apparent reason. I always thought it was a good idea for a Resident Evil game in terms of storyline to have an outbreak that cannot be contained no matter how hard they try. I want real stakes, real consequences. Considering the superhuman nature here, I will assume that Rose will be the protagonist of that story in Resident Evil 9, while someone with superhuman abilities or equivalent will be the antagonist. The only person I could think of that could possibly run counter to Rose is possibly Natalia Corda, aka Alex Wesker. She was a lingering plot thread from Resident Evil Revelations 2, yet we are aware that the mind swap process was successful on this child. This is probably something that needs some vast explaining, since folks were probably lost on the implications here. Once Dark Natalia steps from the shadows, I can see a possible tragedy happening to the older heroes, especially since this monster is still out there under disguise at the Barry Burton residence. At first, I was like, well, I can see Rosemary either getting nerfed or there will be a stronger bad guy in the process. I had a theory that the latter could be reasonable since Natalia was created from a distinctive eugenics experiment called the Wesker Project. Revelations 2 conveyed the fact that T-Phobos was initially derived from the mother virus by Alex Wesker. Her ultimate goal was to surpass her brother without the circumstances that surrounded his downfall, like the prototype T-virus, leading to an instability. Because of this instability, Albert Wesker needed fresh doses of PG67AW to keep his mutations from going haywire. If Wesker overdosed on PG67AW, then his body would internally weaken since it would act as a poisonous spread. Alex wanted to overcome this nonsense due to the power that T-Phobos provided. This meant that the goal was to find a test subject injected with T-Phobos who wouldn't succumb to fear or panic. Once this subject was found, then they would be put into an experimental chamber for 6 months as the brain of the original host is copied and implanted into this new vessel. It's like a digitized brain. We have to remember that Alex Wesker was initially in a sick, decaying body, which didn't give her the same benefits to reap like Albert Wesker. Everything was supposedly seen as a success, which means that Alex Wesker has a body that can't get physically ill, can't experience fear, and the digitized mind is an alternative goal for unlocking immortality. You have to remember that Alex Wesker was creating an immortality virus before her body went to shit, and she ran away from Oswald E. Spencer. Now, if immortality flows through her veins, then I wonder if the prototype T-virus could unlock superhuman abilities for Natalia as well. She has Alex's mind now. I suppose that could mean that further research could continue. If you think about it for a second, there would be no instability like the PG67AW, which was a drawback for Albert Wesker's body, and Natalia isn't frail. Immortality could also counteract any mutation, meaning that Natalia could have immortality plus superhuman abilities with zero weakness. They could also explore something like this if things potentially go absurd in the future, although the writers will probably find some loophole somewhere. Even if this is the implication, Rose might be unstoppable herself, but she isn't quite immortal yet. Chris's status in RE9 will be weird. Chris will be a surrogate father, and he will likely embody a dad role, which is something we never seen for this character in particular as a dad. The closest we ever had to an established protector dynamic was when he was looking after Claire Redfield, his younger sister. However, they are siblings. This is a little bit different. Briefly, let's touch upon the time jump aspect. Everyone is going to be speculating about how RE9 supposedly jumped into the future when we see that epilogue with Rose. I won't really go into great detail about this, but it really is up to interpretation how far the epilogue goes in the timeline. There are labels that say contents can age quicker without care when reading the description on Rose's flask. These were also reused assets taken from Resident Evil 7 as well, so they could be seen as a grain of salt in the grand scheme of things for Resident Evil Village. Since they are in the game and since we are reading them, we're taking them at face value. And I want to say, if all of this is true, if it ends up being a plot point, then either one or two things is going to happen. Number one is that the time jump is real, and the older characters will be ready for a retirement home or morgue. Or number 2, Resident Evil 9 is going to be rampant on flashbacks. Even both can happen, honestly. These flashbacks would serve as a detail for multiple perspectives as we brace ourselves for a notion that involves the end of this mainline story. You're probably going to want all the returning main Resident Evil characters or the side characters to come back for one final ride if they go this route. Barry, Chris, Leon, Rebecca, and Jake may be side cameos from people who really aren't too pertinent anymore, like from the Outbreak games. Maybe bring back Billy Cohen. The main elephant in the room is definitely Jill Valentine, which leads to a tangent storyline that needs resolution. You see, the BSAA North American branch plotted against Chris Redfield for defying orders in his chase against Mother Miranda 3 years ago. In reality, the BSAA always had a dark side, with Chris being pretty frustrated with their orders in Resident Evil 5 and Clive O'Brien being against the establishment. I am extremely positive that Jill's opinion has to factor into what's going on as one of the co-founding members alongside Chris. It's a missed opportunity for sure if Capcom does not do a single thing with this potential storyline and Jill being involved. Resident Evil Village just raised more questions than answers. Who is the mole that is now controlling the strings of the BSAA to send in infected soldiers? Also, will these plot lines be detailed from the cut content about the BSAA soldiers who have these biological enhancements? It surely needs to be full anarchy if all this mystique will keep our interest peaked. Fuck, I didn't even mean to rhyme, but you know, that's just a fucking thing right there. If they want Leon back, then they could do something where they reinforce him in a darker way. They noted that Leon seems very weary after his last canonical appearance in Resident Evil Vendetta. This note was taken for Resident Evil Infinite Darkness as Leon progressed later in the timeline. In Vendetta, Leon is a stumbling drunk, of course, because his team got killed in the raid in Washington, D.C. It's a lot of questions that he gives Chris in that movie as a sort of auditory cue, so to speak, where he says, "Why do we keep doing this? I'm tired of doing this, Chris. When is it gonna be over? I'm tired of fighting, Chris." It seems like they want to play up on this a little bit. Maybe they can make him a more depressive character after constant BOW fighting. Maybe he wants to give up fully, even on the battlefield. The plot might be similar to how Dom was in Gears of War 3, where he just wanted a way out through death. There's also a ton of unanswered questions that could be summarized with relative simplicity. Where is Jake Mueller? Could you logically bring back and replicate Albert Wesker for fan service? If the fungal root could be duplicated, then does that mean that there's more of them in America? Could these potential super colonies lead to an aforementioned apocalypse? If they do bring Natalia back, then what will happen to the Burtons since she lives with them? How do these agents feel about working with BOWs in their factions like Rose, Sherry, or even Jill Valentine, who had abilities at one point? What is the current relationship between Mia Winters and Rose Winters? Also, what was the full extent of Mia's experiments that were conducted by Mother Miranda? After all, there was that discarded story beat where Mia Winters was bound to a wheelchair way after Rose's birth. Maybe that could be reutilized to make Mia become sick in Resident Evil 9. I think it would be absolutely fucking crazy if Mother Miranda had a trump card and tried to resurface in some way through Mia to haunt Rose and torment her over Ethan's death. Then she has to mercy kill her own mother with some insane boss fight. It makes sense to me to end the Mia arc in some dramatic fashion. If Ada was cut from Village as a protector of Ethan, then she will have to return to probably save Rose. Who knows? Zoe did see the letter regarding the criticism between Chris and the BSAA. She wrote, "It's not over," on the back of this very letter. Could Zoe be a key player yet again in this new entry? What will happen to the organizations like Blue Umbrella, The Connections, Hound Wolf, etc.? How will they operate? And most importantly, who is this particular mole that sold Chris Redfield up the river. Hound Wolf will probably get top billing in the DLC, only to die later for Apocalypse. So there's that. I fully expect Chris's team to be eliminated per tradition in Resident Evil 9. I mean, come on man, Chris's big fear is that someone like Wesker can come into a position of power yet again. Someone as equivalent, someone as dangerous, ruthless, cunning, intelligent, strong, etc. He's been training the BSAA their entire lives for this. This whole dilemma is something that he fears. I would imagine that things will be different since the BSAA North American branch is now in shambles on the trustworthy front. Then there was a full-scale war that was cut from the game involving Hound Wolf and infected members of the BSAA. Capcom does have that tradition for reusing ideas, and that could happen at any point in time for Resident Evil 9. The last thing is that it seems like they plan to supposedly use isolated incidents for future Resident Evil titles. I can see this rumor coming true if you really think about it. Capcom has been crafting a grand, meticulous main plot for years. It seems clear they want to find a way to branch off from the main continuity and make up something new. I doubt that they want to completely reboot what Resident Evil was known for. However, anything can happen. It's obvious that this would be the answer to their dilemma here, a soft reboot where Resident Evil 9 and below is canon, but the events going forward are different, which seems perfectly ideal. This will be another way to pass the torch to newer individuals. I just hope the older characters aren't completely forgotten about in this transition. This seems pretty equal to Final Fantasy. New game, new storyline, new location. That will be perfectly fine. Either way, this is Renegade Operative signing out. How are you guys feeling about this video? Comment below, let me know, slap a like. Be sure to subscribe, bell notification, all that good stuff to keep notified with the videos that I put out. The next video I put out is definitely going to be about the Suicide Squad because I want to talk about my feelings on that movie, and I won't be able to see Shang-Chi immediately. I will get to that soon, and I will be doing comic stuff probably for the next week or so as I sort all that out. So look forward to that. I will see you guys next time and look forward to the next big video coming soon. Later. Take care and be safe.